Should you call someone's bad behavior out in front of others? For example, if they rolled their eyes while someone else is speaking.
Yeah, that's a tricky one, because part of me says, oh, like, you're going to put someone into a whole world of shame if you do that in front of other people. So my, part of me would be saying, okay, after the meeting, I'd be having a conversation around, hey, I noticed this. What was that about? And setting some boundaries around, actually, that's not okay. That's sort of, but what was going on for you? But there's also that another part of me thinks there are at times a need to call out behaviours sort of publicly when they're happening, to to let sort of the broader organisation know what's okay, what's not, and build that sort of culture of not allowing really bad behaviours. So I think for me it's quite complex. Yeah. So I think it would really depend on the context and the gravity of the behaviour and who was there and what was going on. If it was just people internally, if there were clients there, like there's so much that would influence which way I'd tackle that.
Renee?
Yeah, I agree. I think like rolling your eyes at someone, I think that's certainly a kind of after the meeting, hey, I noticed you did that. That doesn't feel like it's constructive to a kind of positive working relationship. If you don't agree with what I've got to say, let's just have a really human conversation about that, rather than those kind of little microaggressions. But that being said, we do every 6 or 3 months bullying and sexual harassment kind of reminder training here, and that kind of ally behaviour of calling out really bad behaviour is really important. So depending on the scale of that, if something's not right, or if you hear someone doing something that is definitely needs to be called out in the moment, whether that's a client or not, there are ways in which to do that, both quite directly but also indirectly. So whether it's kind of making a joke of it or not making a joke of the behaviour, kind of really calling that out. Wow, that's really outdated kind of thinking, or that's very 80s of you, or right up to the, hey, that's actually not how we behave in this agency. And we have a philosophy of caring fiercely, and that's not really what you're doing here today. So it is really, it's complex.
It just reminded me of this company I used to work with. They were a mining company, so really male culture, and they were trying to tackle, those sorts of really sort of misogynistic behaviours in the workplace. And they came up with this internal campaign, which was great because they educated everyone basically on what was acceptable, what wasn't. But then they gave them a mechanism to call it out. So the tagline was, say it again. So there'd be these like conversations, in the locker room or whatever after work, and you'd hear these old guys, saying, oh, say it again. So sometimes, it's developing it's sort of a non-shaming, sort of endorsed way of calling out behaviour, which is because we all do fall below the line at times, given the right amount of pressure. But to have a way of acknowledging that and letting someone know when they've done that, but that isn't like you're a bad person, you deserve to be, excluded. Yeah,
that's really good. So we run, or just about to start, these groups called Never Not Creative Allies, and they're men-only groups for helping men be more supportive of women and other genders at work. And as part of that, there's a guy that helps us with this and he's helped us. He sort of guided the program that we put together, and he is a bloke coach, and he's given a few of us a free session, and it was brilliant. I did it last week, and one of the things that we talked about was this difference between calling it out and calling it in. And I had an experience last year where I'd been at an event, a story was told that was totally inappropriate in front of a massive room of people. And, you know, I'd had my head in stuff that was, you know, we can't do that. We need to stop it. We need to rid our industry of this type of thing. And I went through like all these emotions of, oh, I should call it out here and now. Like, let's just get it out there. Then it's like, no, I'm going to write an article. I'm going to post it on LinkedIn, or I give it to my umbrella or whatever it is. And then I thought about it a bit more, and I spoke to a few other people, and I was like, no, well, I'm just going to have a conversation with this person and tell them how I'm feeling and ask them why they thought it was okay. And there's this difference between, I think this is the challenge with calling something out, is you call it out in the moment, right? And you call it out without thinking about what that could do to the other person. And whilst you may not care because the other person's being an arse, once you've been through that and you think about like, well, maybe I've made mistakes in the past, and maybe if someone called it out publicly, like what would that do to me? And I think that's a really interesting way of looking at it, of like calling it in. So being able to go, look, we can have that conversation. It was a horrible conversation. Hated it. It was very like, I probably needed to look for green stuff all the time because it was just very, very like nervous. But it's a good way of just going, actually check what's the grown-up way of approaching this, even if that person wasn't being a grown-up in the first place. And then of course there's always the advice around, you know, you give bad feedback in private and good feedback in public, which is kind of what you were saying earlier. So yes, there's some fascinating ways of how to deal with that kind of thing. And I think we need to address bad behavior. There's just different ways. That 80s one, Renee, I've used that a few times, of when you get inappropriate things from men and we go, oh, haven't heard that for 20 years, you know. And I do like the say it again is very good. That's like say it again, and someone goes, should I?